All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. I'm your host, Matt Hines. So excited to have you here for another conversation about what's working today in B2B sales and marketing, especially in those complex sales motions that could really use a little more predictability. Thank you very much for being here. If you're watching or listening on demand, thank you for downloading and subscribing. Every episode of Sales Pipeline Radio always available at salespipelineradio.com. And today we're going to do a little bit of a marketing therapy session with my friend Chris Bauserman. He's the CMO at Connexium. And we've had a couple conversations recently, Chris, just about just marketing best practices. And whenever we talk about marketing best practices today, we tend to get into sort of dumpster fire territory as well, because this is not easy. And we talk about what I've sometimes heard described as complexity creep. I mean, how marketing gets done today. I wish it wasn't so, but to do marketing well requires a lot of layers of complexity that can be managed. So would love to have you share. You're in the seat, man. So what are you seeing at Connexium? What are some of the challenges that you hear from some of your other CMO peers as well?
Yeah. Hey, Matt, thanks for having me on. Always great to chat and to chat with fellow go-to-market leaders out there about what's happening. It's no stress day, still seeing headwinds and just in terms of customers really wanting to spend and really start off new initiatives beyond the top two or three, right? The biggest challenge we have is find a great customer or prospects who everything looks like it could be great, but I can only do three things this year. The plate's already full. So let's talk later. So that's the biggest challenge I think right now is creating that urgency in the market.
When I think about urgency, I think about the difference between manufacturing and discovering it. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
So I think that manufacturer versus discover is spot on. And what we've talked about in the team this year is really tied two big goals in the go-to-market. I'm not a big fisher, but the fishing analogy happened to work. One is we're going to do much better at spearfishing. And that's really swarming and spending disproportionate amount of effort in marketing and sales on accounts that are showing any signals that might be buying, right? And it could be buying an alternative approach, but just in the market, this is one of those top priorities. Let's not treat them as equal opportunity. Let's go at them hard. And the second one is that creation, right? Is that building it. And that's called fatten the fish, right? And that's kind of getting to your account-based marketing, your thought leadership. But again, really trying to dial in and say, hey, we know these are the things that matter to you. Let's educate you on why the things that matter to you actually are helped by doing something that looks like what we can help with. And let's start those conversations early, meet them where they are in terms of their buying process, which is nothing, right? Their problem aware though. Let's meet them at the problem aware state and then really nurture them and work on those relationships to find out the opportunity.
You start early, you educate, you build a relationship. These things take time, Chris, especially on B2B sales,
Yeah.
especially in the complex B2B sale. We haven't even talked about buying committees and
Yeah.
multi-threading yet. We all have a number to hit. We're all in a hurry to get those deals
Yeah.
closed. Risk reward in terms of pushing them too quickly, where we know where they need to be, but they
Yeah.
need to be committed to change first. That creates tension in the organization as well, right? We need to take these steps to get someone ready to be successful. So we want to apply some polite persistence, perhaps.
Yeah.
But where do you find that balance? And what do you listen for with prospects that indicate some might be ready to move a little faster?
The listing is really important, and it's also really important to think about matching both the conversation topic and the offer with the right level of the organization, right? And I think more so than ever with tight budgets, it's important to find topics of conversation that get in the agenda of more senior leadership. When you think about budget makers versus budget spenders, and so in those tight environments, having those conversations with VPs, C-level prospects, which can be really hard enterprises, but you got to put that investment in it. That's your target market.
Yeah.
But getting in their conversations, finding out what's on their agenda and how you could hook into that is important, right? And then, I'd much rather have a conversation with the CEO who says, yes, this will really help in this part of the business, this part of the business, and I can see this has even more value than you're talking about. Challenges, money might be a problem. My CIO is overburdened. Let me talk to him. Let's get back to you. That's a conversation. Now you can say, hey, the momentum is there. Then how can we handle that objection, right? Let's talk about how we can do this without taking a ton of your CIO's time. That's the bottleneck. So that's probably the biggest thing. We are in a situation now because of XYZ acquisition we just did. There's no even cut to this till October. Then that's still a win, right? Because you kind of created that, nurture them, and then make sure you re-engage in September.
Talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Chris Bauserman. He's the CMO at Connexium. We're talking about so far the buying journey
Mhm.
and helping managing modern buyers through that, the need to educate, the need to help people discover urgency and a commitment to change. And so the complexity creep that we talked about at the beginning comes both from the buying process as well as the selling process, because it is also complicated. Right?
Yeah.
We used to think it was successful when you do like marketing's the top of the funnel, sales the bottom. Marketing just generate leads, give them to sales, everybody's good. That doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not any way to create any kind of predictable outcomes from your pipeline. Talk a little bit about the need to create that same level of orchestration using some of the same discipline
Yeah.
to manage how you sell in a more predictable, successful manner.
Yes. And that's equally as important, right? Because you've got to have that great outreach in it and also make sure everyone knows their role, right? ABM, right? One to few, you've got some top 50 or 100 accounts you're really going after. Those you want to really coordinate with the AEs, right? They're going to own a number of those accounts. What message are you providing? What message are the BDRs providing? How are you nurturing them? And then they're in there, and it's one of the things that we do all the time is regularly meet across sales and marketing and BDRs and say, let's look at all the pipe per territory and say which of these are stuck and need help, right? Because that's one of the things you look at going from a transactional buying experience to this creating demand and nurture and really trying to drive that urgency is that you have to look at this and say, who do we have here? Do we get a customer reference in front of them earlier than we would? Do we have another executive meeting, right? What is it that we need to show? Or do we need the BDRs to go find a couple of other people who are influencers and just directly connect with them? So I think that's a key part of that team sport and that collaboration is once it's in the pipeline, then making sure that you keep focusing on one step forward.
Really good advice at the operational level. Let's take a step back and think about that from a foundational perspective. Like doing that coordinated dance in the midst of the funnel is like critically important. But if we don't agree on who we should be selling to in the first place, then we might be doing a dance with
Yeah.
someone that's never going to go anywhere. How do you build the foundational alignment? Well, it started with just across sales and marketing, because I want to be able to talk about CS and the customer journey as
Yeah.
well. But specifically for net new, what are some of your best practices and positive experience shares
Yeah.
from creating that foundational?
It's a big thing. That's a big exercise we went through last year was to really rethink our ICP. And so one thing is that combination of data and anecdotes is huge, right? Because certain people look at this and say, okay, we ran this analysis on lifetime value and win rates, and this is what good looks like. And I'm a numbers junkie, so I dug into that. But also you got to go through the, of course, listen and talk to customers, ask questions. And then find out why did they use it, why they not, what's the commonality here? What does really good look like? You can't predict it, right? You can't say we know that customers who look like this, who need these things are great customers and great fits. Then, no amount of correlation of data or other things are going to matter, right? So having those two things together, start the foundation of the buy-in, talk about customer success is a great one because it's easy to look and say who our ideal customer should be by what's the highest win rate, the fastest deal velocity, right? But
Yeah.
those aren't necessarily your best customers, right? One of the things I did when I looked at doing the ICP definition last year, and then we put in our first account grading model of kind of A through E accounts. And, we went in there and said, hey, let's look at optimizing not just on win rate or velocity, right? But let's look at lifetime value. Let's look and see those customers who
That's right.
and factoring in the deal size and the profit margin and the NRR, the upsell potential, all of
Yeah.
a sudden moving more to large enterprise customers and upper mid market, which we have a number of, but we didn't focus on as much for the new logo side. Well, so you look at all that and you say, hey, these customers are much more valuable to us than it looks like when you just look at win rate, right? Because they're harder to get, but they're super valuable once you get them. And then having socializing that across the whole ELT with finance and then looking at, can we deliver that? How do we do that? Right. That becomes really important. And that takes a lot of resistance, right? Because people are sort of set, well, this is
Yeah.
what it could look like. And then you got to bake that in the systems too, right? And that's why I mentioned the account scoring model. So it's taken some time and shown both the historical data, but now the go forward data that says, hey, if it's an A through a C, right? So for example, we're going to invest money going after them, outbounding them. When you see an intent signal, we're really going to swarm them. We're going to invite them to, to bespoke events. But if it's a D, which is a big portion of our possible market, they self-select, they come to us. We're going to absolutely follow up on them, but we're not going to chase them, right? And if they're E, we're not going to invest because we know it's not going to be a good fit.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing up this idea of really understanding your total acquisition cost and then understanding lifetime value and breaking that down into segments and really making a business decision then to say, what are we willing to spend to achieve a certain lifetime value? And there's not a right and a bunch of wrong answers. There's a bunch of possible right answers for
Yeah.
you. Depending on the stage of your company's maturity, you might be willing to spend a high percentage of lifetime value on acquisition costs because you're trying to prove your model, trying to get product market
Yeah.
fit, trying to get your next round of funding. Then at some point you get bought by private equity. And now the opposite is true. Now I care about profitability, but profitability is a category. Like what's the number you're trying to hit? And depending on what that number is, those ratios start to really matter.
Yeah.
And finding out that information might be counted. So I'll never forget doing this work for a company that was selling a CRM to small businesses. And they had all different kinds of industries, like they were coming by the product. But when we looked into the data, we found that home services companies, like roofers, contractors, and painters, they, for some reason, just loved product, thought the features would fit perfectly for them. They had like 3, 4x lifetime value.
Yeah.
So not only does that mean I'm willing to just go and double down on to getting market share in that category, I'm potentially willing to spend more money to do it. Potentially, right? So now you got a business decision to make. How far and how deep do I want to go? How much of that margin am I willing to spend just to get more revenue? Again, depending on what are your exit strategies, what are your objectives in the business? What's the corporate strategy that is driving your go-to-market strategy? I think maybe the last question is to wrap up. Marketers, I think too often get the reputation of the worst being the arts and crafts department. And maybe in the middle somewhere is they're trying to drive revenue, but they're focused on the raw metrics and they're not really speaking the language of the business. Talk about what it takes for a marketing leader to really be seen and prove themselves as a business leader. Is it conversations? Is it level of engagement? What are some of the keys to doing that well?
The first and foremost thing, all right, is to not view yourself as an operator, right? Don't think it's just twisting the dials to manage your operation, but look at yourself as that person who's steeped in the market, right? That, there's a discussion about, chief market officer versus chief marketing officer is a great slight turn of reference, right? So I think one of the first things is be able to bring feedback to leadership team as the board about what's happening in the market. And whether that's through a lot of work with deals and deal analysis, whether it's listening to customer conversations, whether it is with awesome independent analysis, doing market studies, analyst conversations, being that market expert and pulling all together is probably one of the most important things. Because then you can start driving corporate strategy, product strategy, having real insights drive that. And of course, the second thing is just don't leave the vanity metrics, right? That's probably the biggest thing that marketers get smacked with is talking about website traffic, impressions, then what would that do with revenue?
It's all building blocks, right?
Yep.
You're not going to get pipeline unless you do activities. You're not going to get leads unless you go to market in certain channels. But I think there's a difference between saying these are the building blocks, the means, and going to the board and saying, well, here's the trade shows we went to, and here's the traffic we got, and this up and to the right, it was just the marketing of more.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. How is that driving impact? How is that leading somewhere? How do we use what you have learned and done to create more predictable outcomes moving forward? The other point I'd make is you start talking about understanding the market maturity, right? Understanding the maturity of your market, of your customer base, of your competitors, and comparing that to then your corporate strategy. Who are our owners? What are their objectives? What do we think our exit strategy needs to be, should be? Those all have a direct impact on what the go-to-market and marketing strategy should be. It's a huge opportunity, I think, in companies where if those things aren't being compared, you're not asking those questions, if you aren't on a regular basis, ensuring that everyone understands it is aligned around what is our corporate strategy. Do we have a point of view that everyone at least generally agrees on in terms of the level of maturity, and then how that translates into business outcomes? I don't hear those conversations happening in C-suite often enough. And why not the CMO to step in and lead that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. You have those conversations as marketers, your whole job is to be audience aware, understand the audience, listen to the audience, target the audience, the right message. And I think marketers are generally wired to be great at that outside the company. And then face plan inside the company when they start talking marketing speak to the board, to finance, et cetera. About brand or trade shows is a great example. There's so much art and science, sausage making in there, and some parts of marketing are very measurable. But the more you start trying to get into all the specifics, the more you create confusion. And the brand is a great no CMO should be going in and pitching a big brand investment. But what they want to do is, hey, given that we're trying to enter this market, this segment, move the needle on this level of efficiency, I'm doing things that are going to unlock that, and rolling those numbers together and showing the total outcome as opposed to here's how the sausage is made, because most people don't understand how marketing makes the sausage, and it just confuse people trying to get into those details.
So just to round this out, we were talking about helping prospects understand the need, helping prospects ask the right questions. Can't you apply that to your C-suite peers? Can't you apply that to the board? I read a Google study that said only 3 or 4% of corporate B2B board members have significant marketing experience in their background.
Yeah.
So they may be trying to ask the questions, but you are the expert. Like you're the marketing expert coming in the room. So say that's a great question. But when I think about the outcome, I think about it this way. And you can do this in a respectful way. You can do it sometimes in one-on-one conversations outside
Yeah.
of the broader board, at full board meeting. But sometimes I see marketers that just are a little too reactive about where they are as opposed to saying, here's my point of view. I know a lot of chief market officers, when they do a board presentation, they start with perspective on the market. They don't
Yeah.
start with results. They don't even start with pipeline and revenue impact. They
Right.
start with here's what the market is right now.
Yes.
Right. Let's have that discussion first. And when you can do that with your sales peers, with your CS peers, now you got a united front, right? And it's not about us versus them or creating your alliances. It's just like, here's how we think about the business. Here's how we think about the market. And this is why we've done what we're doing and
Right.
planning on doing what next.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then and everything you say then that you're going to take action on, talk about the actions to achieve, but again, whether it's CAC, driving bookings, new markets, win rate, velocity, whatever the case is, that's what you're doing, as opposed to you're launching this campaign.
Love it. Chris Bauserman, CMO at Connectium. Thanks for joining us today. Sales Pipeline Radio.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Excited to have y'all here. We'll be here next week with another episode. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week, rest of your month, your quarter, wherever you're at. We'll see you next week.